Hey there, folks. Welcome to another episode of GH Reacts, where we will be talking about Now and Then, the Beatles' final song. But is it any good? What does it sound like? What's my reaction? All your questions answered next. Hey, folks. Welcome back to GH Reacts. So, I'm reacting to this song a little bit later than some of the other channels that are out there. I know, in the YouTube biz, which I've never really prescribed to 100%. I kind of do it when I can. But at any rate, I'm doing it late. I know that everybody kind of jumps on it while the iron is hot. I wanted some time to actually kind of sit with it to make sure that my initial feelings about the song weren't correct or incorrect, to kind of look at it as objectively as I possibly could, which is extremely hard being as big of a Beatles fan as I am. So I definitely wanted to look at this as as an objective observer as much as I could, and kind of give you guys my honest thoughts on what I think of it. I agree with George. That's all I'll say. For those of you who are big Beatles fans, and we'll get into it as I go along, George didn't like the song. And I will give you my reasons. I will tell you exactly. I'll go with like the good and the bad, and we'll kind of leave it at that. So we'll start with the good because, everybody wants positivity in this world. And the good thing is it's great to hear all four of them on one track again. That's cool. I have to say that that's never going to get old, in my opinion, hearing new stuff that we've never heard before. So, that part of it is really cool. That was like part of the emotional response that you get, is hearing all of them together again. It's especially obviously emotionally touching to hear John, and especially with his vocals being as clear as they are. From a technical standpoint, from the good part of the technical standpoint, I will say that this new software that was developed by Peter Jackson is amazing. When you watch the documentary, which is actually on HBO Max, if you haven't seen it, it's only 12 minutes long, but it gives you a little bit of an insight into the making of the record and everything. And there's a part where they play John's unaccompanied track of just his voice. And he's just got one of those voices that, when you listen to his voice, again, speaking objectively, he doesn't have the greatest voice in the world, but it's his subject matter, and it's the fact that he's able to emotionally touch us with the way that he sings songs like Day in the Life, and, songs like Julia, and especially some of the slower ones, Dear Prudence. He's just got that like effect on you. And hearing that again is obviously great. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's all the good things. So I loved the fact that they were able to, take his voice out, make it sound really good. And that was really the best part of the record, I thought. So it was very nice to see that. Very nice to see the four of them together again. I'm trying to think of more good stuff before I get to my bad stuff. All right. I really can't. If I get into more good stuff, I'll throw it out there as I'm going through my bad, if I think of it as I'm talking. But the first thing is this cover. What is that? The Beatles words do not appear anywhere on the cover of that. And I know that, they've done that before, Abbey Road. They've done, records where their name doesn't appear on the front, and I get it, but they appeared on the front, so it's like, okay, like, it's just boring, man. It's the most boring kind of generic looking cover that it just doesn't do anything for me. It's the last single. It's the last single. I know minimalism is great, and minimalism can be great, in some ways. Even if they had an all-white cover with just John's, what they wrote on the cassette, the Now and Then. I don't know if it's John's handwriting or whose handwriting it is, but just having the Beatles and Now and Then, or whatever color they wanted to use, Now and Then, so that they didn't look like the White Album. I would get it. That would be cool. but emotionally, this doesn't do anything for me. So that I just wanted to start with the packaging, because you could walk by that in a store and like not ever know it was the Beatles if you didn't know what was going on. Let's talk about the song itself. So the song itself, Now and Then, from a standpoint of John's, pantheon of songs, it's a relatively simple song, which not necessarily doesn't make it bad. And it's got a nice kind of sentiment to it, and it all works in the standpoint of like it being the Beatles' last song. Now and Then, I Miss You. It all makes sense that they miss each other. It again, I'm trying to pull the emotional part out of it for a second. Just objectively look at the song as what it is. It's kind of a boring song, generally speaking, from John's body of work. There's many other songs that I liked better. I thought Real Love, of the 3 songs that they worked on in '95 for the anthology, Real Love was a great song. Free as a Bird was a little slow, kind of droning. This one, same thing. I just feel like it might have all come from like the same recording kind of time, and maybe he was just in one of those moods where the stuff that was coming out of him was more, I don't want to call it melancholy, but more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like he was just being a little bit more sentimental, and that was maybe what was going on at the time. So, so the song itself, and then you talk about the recording of the song. Okay. This is where probably a bulk of my problems come in to the song itself. It's just loud and obnoxious. It's an obnoxiously loud song. And you can't really hear anything that's going on once everything kicks in. The strings are completely unnecessary. The vocals are terrible. They're really bad because, and really, I can't blame anyone for this. It's hard to, but you're releasing the song as a Beatles song, and so it can be critiqued just like anything else. Paul can't hit the high notes, so there are no high notes in this song. You have Ringo. God, I love Ringo, but you got Ringo coming in on the bottom of the, he's doing like a Now and Then, I Miss You, and then Paul's coming in, and his register is more like John's now was when he was, in his prime. So nobody can get to that high part, Now, here's the thing. The Beatles also never had a problem. Like, as Paul said in the documentary, we put on some string things, little stringy dingies. And he had no problem doing that. But why wouldn't you have a problem bringing in help? Because they didn't have a problem doing that before, when Eric Clapton played on records, when Billy Preston played on records. So you had guys that would come in and play on records. So, now what? You needed high vocals there. You really did. The drums don't really punch out. I think that if you listen to the Red album and the remastered versions of the old songs, the early Beatles songs, the drums are so punchy. They're just like, yeah, man, that swinging hi-hat that Ringo does, it was just right there. It sounds great. It really does. And like the drums on this song, which is supposed to be like so much more, like amazingly mastered and have all the new toys and everything, they sounded like shit. So it just like everything kind of, the melody of it as it plodded along towards the end of the song actually started to get good and everything. And then it ends. And then it's just like, and it's over. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. You go back and you listen to it again and you're kind of like, okay, take your emotion out of it. What does this sound like? What does that sound like? Paul did a slide guitar solo, which a lot of people are mistaking for George doing the solo, but George did not do the solo. He didn't have a chance to. He did lead guitar parts, which you do hear in the song. He did the acoustic guitar, but he did not ever have a chance to do a slide guitar part on the song because he junked it before they were able to get any further on the song and waste more time on it. So, I think that his initial reaction to the fact that it just wasn't that great of a song and it wasn't really worth putting a bunch of time and effort into it tells you all you need to know. I mean, George at that point in 95 wasn't exactly like, he had been around the block. I'm not saying like every one of his albums is amazingly spectacular, but he knows good music when he hears it. And, there were times where the Beatles themselves said like, that's junk, just give it to somebody else, or, let's just not do it. And sometimes they still did it. Sometimes they didn't. But, the whole point of the matter is that I think that the fact that George said it's rubbish and we shouldn't do it, and then, 20 years goes by and you have Paul finishing it, tells you all you need to know about their relationship. And this actually closes the book on it, in my opinion. And it's sad. What do I mean by that? Well, we all know, watching Get Back, George left the Beatles mainly because he just felt like he wasn't being given anything to do. And Paul was being controlling and all this stuff. And he always had this issue with Paul being controlling. In my last video that I just put out, I was talking about them hiring Jeff Lynne to produce the sessions. Now, I'm sure Paul would have said, I can do it my bloody self, or whatever. And, if he'd had his way, he would have. But the reason why Jeff Lynne was there in 95 was to act as a buffer between George and Paul, because George knew how controlling Paul could be. And Paul, obviously having the success that he'd had over the years, of course he's going to swing his what around, and he's going to be the guy who's like, hey, I know the hits. I write the hits. I do the hits, man. I know what I'm doing, and I do see that happening. And I think that George kind of putting his foot down and saying, this song is not worth our time, was his last kind of ability to just utilize his voice, in this particular situation. And he just didn't like the song. And I think, when the Beatles say they're democratic and all four of them have to agree. Well, first of all, you don't know if John was going to agree whether the song was any good. So that's number one. Yes, you could always say, well, the last remaining three Beatles are the arbiters of their own, whatever they're going to do. So Paul says John would say yes. Then what do I say? I can't argue with that. But when George was still alive, he said he didn't like the song. That was the last word on that particular song that George had given to the other two remaining Beatles. And then, Paul kind of found this loophole in George's thinking, and like, well, he might have just been talking about, the fact that we couldn't separate his voice from the piano and it was just taking too long and he was getting crabby or whatever. He was just being George. And so that became the thing. And now as soon as something came along that could separate it, Paul jumped all over it and he was like, we're going to finish the song and we're going to do it. I could be reading into it wrong. I don't know. I just think that George said no. And I think that you should have honored him as much as you're honoring John's legacy. You need to honor George's too. He was one of the Beatles as well. And for him to say, I don't like the song and I don't think we should do it, and then 20 years after his death, you go back and you redo it, it just seems a little disingenuous to me. So that part, to me, is the most sad part of this entire affair. That being said, again, like I said, hearing the four of them on a record together again is nice. If this is the way that they're going to decide to say, like, this is the last song we're going to release, this is their decision on that, it's kind of a weak exit, to be honest. In my opinion, It could have been something a little bit more up tempo. It could have been a little bit more, just the four of them banging away again, which I always think they were at their best when it was just the four of them banging away. Even though there's beautiful music made with the strings and Sgt. Pepper and all that stuff, I get it. It's an amazing album and everything. But in my opinion, when I go to listen to the Beatles, hearing the four of them bang away, really the five of them, because I thought Billy Preston should have been a full-time member of the group because he was that good. But that's, Billy Preston made his presence felt, certainly, at the Let It Be and Get Back session. So, everybody knows how good Billy Preston is. But, I think, but hearing the four of them in a naked way, just like banging away on a song and hearing all of their musical genius, honestly, put together in that, sandwich of amazing Beatleness was always the best way to hear them. So hearing it with all these overdubs and things flown in from here, there, and everywhere, and strings that aren't needed and bad vocals and all this stuff kind of piled on top, I don't know, man. It just didn't really do it for me. So, I could be way off. I know a lot of people are, kind of singing its praises and everything, but I think they're speaking more from an emotional standpoint. I mean, the song, it just doesn't sound that good. So you have to be real with yourself and you have to be honest with them because the product is the product, like I know it's the Beatles and I know that like if they had released Why Don't We Do It in the Road as a single, what would have happened, or Wild Honey Pie, was a single. This is a single, we're doing it and that's it, and then it comes out and people are like, what the obviously you have to be honest about the product. The Beatles weren't that stupid, but they released this as a single. And so I'm going to critique it just like any one of their other singles. If you go back to the Beatles 1 and you go back and you look at those 27 prior number one singles, put that up against those. No, it's not. No, it's nowhere near it. Nowhere near it. So again, that's my thought. I just wanted to get it out there for all time, always. Just watch Loki. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. I'm sure this will be a lively one, but I appreciate you stopping by and listening to me ramble for a couple of minutes. We'll see you next time.